Okay. Do I have your permission to be recorded?
Yes.
All right. So let's go over the reading lesson that I observed today. So first of all, I just want to say, like, your learning environment is very clean. It's very organized. It's safe. The kids can walk in and out of things. So it's one of my first observations is always just to look at the learning environment. And so, you know, it's a place that's safe and happy to learn. So good job on that. Your planning, your learning target was posted. You went over it. You talked about the vocabulary in it. The verb that was in there is like collaborate, and there was some kids that didn't know what the word collaborate meant, so that was really good. I liked your use of the instructional slides. The lesson aligns with your TEKS and your essential standards, and you were monitoring constantly, so you were walking around the room checking for understanding. How do you think the lesson went for you?
I taught this same lesson earlier today twice, and I felt it went beautifully both of those times. This time, it was more of a challenge to keep the students engaged, and we had a few issues with some ongoing behavior. So I felt a little bit stressed, not because you were observing, but because some students who really wanted to learn, they were being impacted negatively by some behaviors that were being addressed, but it was hard to redirect.
Yeah, because I did notice one young man who was talking back when you were asking him to do something, and then also the in and out of the door. Now I did shut the door when I came in, so I'm sure that contributed to a little bit, but I set a timer like you said, so the class starts at 1:30. It was 13 minutes before the lesson got started, and I know you said you wanted to talk about pacing. Is that typically about how long it takes to get your lesson started?
It takes about 10 minutes to get going because, as I mentioned earlier, they need a water and restroom break after going, and I would far rather get it out of the way than in the middle of the lesson have a lot of people coming and going and missing what's going on. So it took a bit longer than usual. It usually takes about 10 minutes.
And I do like you had them reading. Most of them were reading. Most of them knew the expectation. They sat down. They were quietly reading. You had a timer going. I saw that you got those timers up there. We had talked about that. And then, you know, most of them, like I say, most of them, there was one or two that were just kind of being stinkers, but most of them knew what to do and cleaned up when you were ready to go. So let's talk about the lesson now itself. How do you feel the lesson, like the substance of the lesson went, regardless of the distractions?
I felt like it was a solid lesson, but it didn't seem to meet the needs of this group of students.
Okay.
I had maybe 5 or 6 who just thought it was wonderful and they had a great time. But one of the problems we ran into is I did mention this to a higher group, and I didn't anticipate this. The entire class was convinced when they arrived that the author's purpose was entertainment, which of course was correct.
Yes.
And it was very hard for them to do suspension of disbelief, because a lot of times our PACE kids or higher kids, they're like, that's not right, so it's not going to be that way. And so finally I just explained to one group, I said, well, when I was young, I was taught that the world was created one way at my church. And when I was at school, we were told about dinosaurs and other things. So when I was at church, I talked about what we did at church. And when I was at school, I said, some people think there were dinosaurs. I said, that way I wasn't agreeing to something I didn't believe in. I said, I'm not asking you to commit that you believe this is the answer. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else, and how do you think someone could think this? What is in the story that they might misunderstand? And one group was able to redirect from that, another group was not quite as successful.
So is this when you put them into groups and they had to argue the different point of view?
They really didn't want to argue.
They couldn't argue the point of view that wasn't their point of view?
They finally could, but it took a lot of encouragement and scaffolding, because it was kind of like they had blinders on and they just couldn't see it. But in this class, everyone agreed that it was entertainment up front. So it was a different situation. First block, they thought it was either persuasive or entertainment. Second block was informative or entertainment. So they were kind of split, and so it naturally lent itself to what I had planned.
To the arguing, yes.
Yes, but apparently it was not the greatest activity for my higher level thinkers, because they could not set aside their just suspension of disbelief. And I mean, they tried, and even without the distractions going on, I think some of them were just really struggling to mistake, this is just not the right answer. Why do you want us to do this? But they did do a good job of providing text support for their responses. And I'm sorry, but the kids wanted to clean the board and I forgot to leave it up there. I didn't, earlier in the day, I took pictures of the groups with their presenting dry erase boards. We didn't have time to do that with this group. This is my largest group, and had to make sure we were ready to leave on time. So I didn't get to take pictures of them, but I did have them write as an exit ticket in their reading journal about their experience of being in a group. Because today was the first day that we did random groups where you didn't get to pick your group, and several of them politely expressed disappointment they didn't get to be with their friends. But I just responded. I said, I understand. I feel the same way. I said, but sometimes in the world we're going to have to work with people who aren't our closest friends, and so this is good practice.
Yeah.
So I think overall, I'd say about 90% of the class was really doing what they were supposed to do and was on board, even if they weren't, shall we say, overly enthusiastic.
Yeah.
But we had the 10% that were either disruptive or disengaged, which I'm not comfortable with 10% not being, I was constantly circulating and redirecting, but when students are fully engaged, they don't need that much redirection.
Yeah, no.
So
that's a good observation and reflection too. And knowing that your third period is going to be like this, you're going to have to adjust your plans by the time you get to third period, because you can't do the same thing you did with the first two classes.
Right, because they're higher and it's the afternoon and it's a larger class.
Yeah.
So I sort of knew those things, but in planning this lesson, I just didn't foresee that it would not be the greatest fit for that class.
So let's talk about the lesson a little bit. So you and I'm going to just kind of summarize what I observed. So you explained that we were going to do a whole group lesson, and you were going to do a small group. So they knew we were going to do whole group first, and then we were going to go into small group. You reviewed the learning target, and then you reviewed the different types of author purposes. Did you do that with your first two classes, or did you do more of like a mini lesson on author purposes? Did you see the need for that at all?
It was more of a mini lesson because those groups aren't quite as high. But I also was able to get all of them to settle down around the carpet because it's smaller groups.
Yeah, okay.
And so it wasn't a lecture, it was more of a collaborative discussion, but I had some slides up and we were discussing it to set the stage.
Okay.
And I kind of got a feel from them up front, how many people, I wrote on the board, I put E for entertainment, I for inform, for persuasion, I took a vote. And in both the classes, they were kind of evenly distributed between two choices. So it naturally lent itself to what I anticipated, but I didn't correctly anticipate that the higher group would be right on with, we know this is entertainment, so why can't we just throw this lesson out and move on? Which I sort of understood, but I was trying to, even though I realized that pretty quickly, I felt it was still a valuable lesson to work on it, supporting yourself from the text, and also how to help another person understand a different point of view. So anyway, it was definitely an experience in randomized groups. And I did let them write about it as their exit ticket. Everyone who wrote got a sticker, and I told them they could be honest. I said, no one's going to read it but me. I said, I do ask that if you weren't happy about something you happened in your group, let's please not name anybody. We're not going to write any names, we're not going to say anything mean, but you can say, maybe someone was off task, or someone didn't help. And so I wanted them to be honest, and a couple of them did write, thank you for listening, and I would say, I understand. Because sometimes working in a group can be really great and sometimes it's not much fun.
Well, I did like how you reviewed your group expectations before they started their group work. How do you feel the randomizing of the groups went?
I like the idea, but I think it's going to take more than one time for them to be comfortable. And I also think the idea you mentioned about maybe doing I didn't have a deck of cards, so I didn't have a good one, but I think having something visual, matching cards, where it's not just you count off and you get what you get. I think,
because some of them weren't paying attention.
Yes, and then some of them we had to just put them in a group. So I like the idea of, I didn't have time to go to the store last night, sorry, but I like the idea of having a deck of cards or some other way of visually having them match up. And I have seen it done in other classrooms as well as at training where the students are on voice level 0 and you have to find your partner just by holding your card up. And I think that would be really great with this group because they get a little overexcited, especially when they've just come in from playing soccer and basketball. So I don't think it was terrible. I just don't think it was.
Okay.
It wasn't as satisfying as I anticipated.
So that's something to keep working on, right? Like you like the randomizing, but you want to find a better way to do that because our focus is organizing students to collaborate. Another thing I liked is you put an exemplar on the board. So you showed them what you wanted it to look like, but there was still a lot of confusion. Like even when the kids got into groups, I know you spent some time having to answer a lot of questions. you know, what do I do with this? Where do I write this? What do I put in my book? And so they had a lot of questions. How do you think that you could maybe lessen the amount of questions that are about the directions before they start working?
I think it would be a good idea. I'm just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Let them have their dry erase boards. Or no, I got a better idea. Let's do that strategy where you have a big poster on the wall. Everybody writes their questions on a sticky note and goes and puts it up. Because I think some of them were genuine questions. Some of them were not listening to directions. And some were just, I don't like this assignment, so I'm dissatisfied and I'm going to be vocal in some way without being rude. Which sometimes, you know, some students do have the sophistication to let you know they're not happy without being rude about it. We do appreciate those students. So I'm thinking maybe having a parking lot question board type thing. That way they can feel like they're expressing their concern, and I can zip over and read it real quick.
Do you think it was more of they were unclear as to what to do, or they were just, like you said, like maybe not excited about it, so they were pushing back?
I think it was a mixture of both. This group does tend not to listen very well to instructions. I frequently have to do a lot of attention getters to get them to clue in. They're definitely not on board with our treatment agreement of we follow directions the first time. And so I'm trying to several positive reinforcements and a few negative ones, such as losing dojo points, because it's just like there's just, I don't know, there's about 10 of them. It's just they've had lunch, they've had recess, they think they're done for the day. And it's like, and some of them are very respectful, well-behaved children, but they just kind of fading out in the afternoon. And we do have late lunch and recess, and we had our snack in the morning. So other than letting them have their water and bathroom break when they come in, I could maybe do a 5-minute brain break halfway through, but we just don't have a lot of time to work with making sure we're ready for dismissal. And this is my largest class. So it's just, I don't think they're going to adjust much, so I'm going to have to adjust.
Well, what about getting them into their group first? If you've got a grouping strategy, say that you start using the cards, you get them grouped quickly, less than 5 minutes. Then once they're in the group, you give directions. And so you kind of separate it, because what's happened is you explained how you were going to group them, then you explained your directions, then you grouped them. So you see what I mean? There was a lot of talking, and then it was like get into your group. And so maybe in that time, the movement of getting into the group, what am I supposed to do? Whereas if they're already in their group, you know, because then they took time to like talk about, well, you do this. I was listening to this group right here, and they were like, well, I don't want to do that. You do that. And so they were arguing for a good couple minutes before they even started on the task. And so like, you know how we talk about like chunking and chewing? So like first group them. Okay, everyone's in the group. Everyone's settled. Everyone has their materials. Okay, now let's talk about what I want you to do in this group. I don't know. That will work with them.
And then maybe set a timer for 5 minutes or 7. Okay, you have this amount of time with the timer up. You have this amount of time to decide who's doing which job. And based on the feedback,
they need like a minute to do that.
Okay, a minute.
Yeah, a minute.
Based on some of the feedback I got in some of the reading journals and just from observing, it seemed to me that
so they had feedback in the journals.
Well, the feedback in journals, but it also seemed that they were very distracted by the materials. So perhaps get them in a group.
The whiteboard.
Everything. They were distracted with all the materials. So first of all, reduce the number of materials we're getting out, I think, because I wound up getting reading journals out. We had decided not to, and then a student asked me, and I forgot and said yes. So I think that would help, but I think also get them in their groups, give my expectations. Maybe they just have one dry erase board right there and one marker. One person's going to be the scribe, and write down what each person's job is. And they have however many minutes you think is appropriate for them to decide that. I also would have liked this activity better with 4 in a group instead of 3. I was trying not to get too many in a group, but the 3 wound up, I'm a middle child. So I'm surprised I didn't think of this. In a couple of groups, we wound up one person feeling kind of left out, like they weren't included. And I think if we had done this particular activity in groups of 4, like I did earlier in the day, you would have had 2 people for and 2 people against. Whereas even in a group of 3 where they were willing to work, then they weren't sure, okay, well, we only have 3 people. Who's going to do for and who's going to do against? And another strategy might be,
what if you tell them what they're going to
tell them what they're doing. Maybe have some kind of indication.
Like if you had done A, B, A, B, A, B, the A's you're going to argue for, the B's you're going to argue against. Like something that I did is I know that our plans are all electronic. And I mean, that's how they want us to be. They want us using Google and everything. I would print the plans, but I would only print that day of
That's
plans.
what I did. I just printed my lessons and the day.
And I would make notes on there of like what I needed to have ready before that class came out. So if you knew that you needed whiteboards over to like, because I would write all over my plans. I wouldn't put it in where like everyone would see it, but I'd write on there, you know, make sure my grouping strategy is this. I need these materials out before, and I was just kind of like anticipating anything that might interrupt my lesson and what I need to do before I teach that lesson. And so it's kind of like your pre-plan for that lesson. And so
I think what I need to do is maybe get a crate or a box for this class, because what happens is, as you saw, I don't have time to finish my lunch before they come in, because I have lunch duty and then I have to deal with some student type things. And so I don't mind bringing my food in here to eat, but I'm eating while they're getting their water and bathroom breaks. But if I've got all their stuff together, that doesn't happen in the morning. I don't have that situation. But in the afternoon, if I had all the things for that one class in a crate, other than their big books, which they can hand out, like I could already have their reading journals in the crate, then I would have the crate right there ready to go with what we need for that class. Because they're the class, quite frankly, that needs the least wait time.
yeah, because I hear what you're saying is that like you have to give them that break before they come in. So that's already taking away from your instructional time. And then you have dismissal, which is taking away from the instructional time at the end. So you're in a crunch, right?
Exactly.
And these are kids that get bored easily if they're left to idle, right? So this is probably the class that you have to be the most prepared for, because they don't need to sit there for very long. So that's just something to keep in your head. And I think that's kind of like a generic thing to work on no matter what your lesson is. Now, we did talk yesterday that we were going to try pull theme in. Did you get to that?
I was not able to get to that.
Okay. Did you get it with any of the other classes?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
We did work on writing and phonics in the other classes.
Okay.
I decided last night that I was biting off more than I could chew, or maybe more than they could chew. So I didn't even go there, because sometimes you can fit extra things in, and some days that's just not going to work. So I didn't get to do that. I liked the idea, because I thought they would have dovetailed nicely, but I'll just springboard off of
this group might have been able to handle it, though, since they were already set in what they, you know, they knew it was entertaining and they weren't going to budge. You could have flipped right over to theme if you wanted to.
You know, if I'd been thinking, that would have been a good thing to do. You know, so maybe with this group, have contingency plans.
Yes. Yes.
If this activity does not seem to be needed, they've already mastered the next skill or whatever previously. Plan B.
Enrichment for them.
Exactly. I just don't think today's lesson was a good match for them.
Yeah. Okay. Let me look at what else I put up here. I put always have clear directions and expectations, and I just noticed because there was a lot of confusion about what to do. Model for these kids. I think, do you have a My Book? Do you have like a kid's copy of the book?
We do have extra copies, because some extras were ordered.
I heard a kid saying, where do I write in my book? And like, I know that you showed like a picture on the whiteboard,
but to show them the
actually show on the material, so then they can kind of put that together.
Matter of fact, I have a student who moved away. I should use that book.
Yeah.
Because it's already partially used.
Yeah.
I have a hardcover one, but we don't write in those.
Yeah.
But I could use the book for the student that moved away.
Yeah. So do that. And then let's see down here. So I just said, the clear expectations and the modeling will definitely assist with pacing, because it's going to lessen the amount of questions that they're asking to clarify. Chunk and chew with them. So that was my suggestion, to like group first and then give directions. May not work, but it's something to see if, you know, if I group them first, get them all settled, and then give directions, do I have less questions asking about it? I mentioned printing the notes and just making your own plans. Keep using timers. That seemed to help when you had that timer going. I sent you some timers, but it looks like you went and got your own fall ones.
I found some before you sent me those, but I still appreciate it.
No, I was going to send you Halloween ones, and then I was like, oh, you know, like, then she's going to have to change it, so I sent you some generic ones.
That was something I love fall, but that Google sheet you sent me for parent conferences, that's great. I've been working on that.
Okay, good. And then, have you ever thought about like splitting up your tables and making smaller groups so they're already grouped smaller? for you?
I have thought about it, but the problem is we're not allowed to get rid of any of this furniture in this room. I
know. It's not the
And
best furniture.
There's not a lot of ways to do it and have enough seats.
How many students do you have? And like, what's your biggest class?
22. Originally it was going to be 30. We had some no-shows. So my class was set up to accommodate 30. One thing I do like about it right now is that students will ask me, Ms. Day, can I sit in your chair? Or can I go to the round table? And, you know, they know that if they would prefer to work in a different location, it's okay with me. And if there's a problem, I will come talk to you and we might need to make a change. So I agree with your point. In the past, my tables were set up just a small group. I taught first grade for many years. But it's something to think about, but there's just not a whole lot of room in here. So I'm not sure.
Well, if you ever want help with that, I change the arrangement of my room monthly. I always is keeping them moving and keeping them in different groups and organizing them differently. And so I'm willing to help you if you want to. These aren't my favorite tables. We got them after the remodeling, and they're very difficult to get big bodies together, but I can help you with that. And then just always anticipate areas of confusion or misconceptions, which we talked about. Now you know this group shows mastery of the skill, so have your contingency plan, your enrichment for them, and then have your materials ready to go, which you said you might need a crate. I have a crate I can give you, but in order for us to like stay within our time limit, because we've got about 4 or 3.5 minutes, I want to hear about the exit tickets.
Okay, I just picked some. I read all of them. They're in no particular order. This was one of the boys. I was in a group today, and one of my partners was going back to his seat and was very annoyed. He was normal while presenting. After all, he was pretty normal. I felt good about my group.
So what was the prompt that you asked them to write?
I asked them to write how they felt about working in a group today.
Okay.
Which I've not asked them about before, because before they picked their own groups and I just figured they were happy. This was another one of the boys. Working in my group, I felt like we were not collaborating. Some people worked on their own, and one person was not going with us and went ahead. I also felt we were not always on task and wasted our time playing. We were also not writing the entire time. I actually thought they showed a great deal of maturity.
No,
This was one of the boys.
Well, honest about what they were doing in their group.
That's one of the boys. These are from the girls just because they were more comfortable expressing themselves. I worked in a group today. I felt pretty well, but a little stressed. I didn't exactly like it, but we worked together and we didn't argue. Although one of my partners got me a little annoyed because they were talking while we were working hard. That was me as a child. Y'all are messing us up. Another girl. I worked in a group today, and I think that I felt good about working with them. We communicated with others by presenting, and it felt very refreshing. We came out with great ideas, and we trusted the answer. We had a lot of fun, and it turned out great. So some groups were very successful and had a good
And that's really, it's good feedback for you as a teacher, too, to like, okay, who's working well with each other, who's not.
Right. They started this over again. Okay, one of the girls. I worked in a group today. I felt not great, but okay. Some of our group members were not doing anything. We had a hard time working together. It was not that great, but still good. We were also sometimes arguing with each other. My experience was in a hurry. I hope you understand. And so with this particular student, I thanked her for her honesty and trust in me. And I also told her, I said, I understand what that's like. Sometimes you can have an experience that's not really all bad or all real good. It's kind of mixed up. And sometimes that can give you some confusing feelings about it. Last girl. I worked in a group today. I did not like it. It was not the assignment, it was the people. We had some problems, and this bit is sort of not really necessary, but there was no other work. That comes to me. One point, my partner was a bit distracted, and I was getting confused. I like grouping, but with my friends. I like groups with my friends. I was also frustrated with my partners. P.S. My BFFs are Graceland and Teresa, I think.
I'm telling you who their friends are.
Tell me who your friends are. So I didn't say you couldn't write the name of a friend that you were going to be positive about.
Yeah.
So, and if I wanted to do math, I could
So what
figure
can
out
you
just
take from the feedback you got from your students?
Well, the one that gave me the biggest feedback was the one about there was not enough work to do. Because I forgot to take into account that some students work faster than others.
Yeah.
And so especially,
what were they going to do when they're finished?
Especially when you're going to do a randomized group, some are going to get finished like maybe 10 minutes before the other ones, and then that's boring to sit there and be
Yeah.
frustrated because your group's not catching up with you.
Yeah.
So-
someone's knocking.
Come
Well,
in.
it's time we can cut the tape. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh,
with
you're
me.
welcome. Thank you for coming and giving your feedback. I appreciate it.